The city was not built to be found. It lay beneath a sheet of ancient ice, so thick and quiet that sound itself seemed to slow as it passed through. Above it, the surface world moved on without knowing. Snow fell, wind carved the land, light came and went. But below the ice, nothing followed the rhythm of day or night. Here, time did not advance. It settled. The city had no name that could be spoken aloud. Names had weight, and weight caused pressure. Pressure caused cracks. So the people who lived there learned long ago to refer to it only indirectly. The place below, the lower streets, where the ice holds. No one remembered exactly who had built it. There were stories, of course, passed quietly from one generation to the next. But even those stories avoided detail. Detail made things too clear. And clarity was dangerous. The only thing everyone agreed on was this. The city existed because it could not exist anywhere else. Long before the ice, before the silence became law, there had been a surface. There had been light, and with light came attention. Attention turned into memory. Memory turned into change. And change, for reasons no one could fully explain anymore, had been fatal. So they went down. They carved slowly, patiently, never rushing. They learned how to shape stone without heat, how to move without friction, how to live without being noticed. Not by the surface, not by each other, not even by themselves. Over time, the ice grew thicker above them, sealing the city away, not just from the world, but from history. Children were born who had never seen the sky. Elders died having forgotten the sound of wind. And between them, life continued in a careful balance. Quiet footsteps, muted voices, controlled breaths. The ice was not just protection. It was structure. It was law. Every home was built with rounded edges so sound would not linger. Every corridor curved gently so nothing could be seen too far ahead. Light came from sources no warmer than a body, pale and constant, casting shadows so soft they barely existed. The people believed shadows were dangerous. Because shadows meant contrast, and contrast meant visibility. At the center of the city stood no palace, no temple, no monument, only a wide chamber known as the Still Hall. It was there that decisions were made, always slowly, always in silence. Words were used sparingly. Gestures carried more meaning than speech. And for a very long time, longer than anyone could measure, the system worked. Until the water appeared. It was first noticed by a child. A thin line running down a wall that had always been dry. Clear, almost invisible. At first it was dismissed as imagination, then as condensation, then as something that should not be spoken about. But the line grew. A drop formed and fell. It was the first sound the city had heard in generations. No one spoke when the sound was heard again. The child who had first seen the water was standing still, eyes fixed on the wall, as if afraid that looking away might cause it to vanish. The adults gathered slowly, keeping their distance. They did not touch the wall. Touch transferred warmth. Warmth altered things. Another drop fell. It landed on the stone floor and spread into nothing, leaving no mark behind. But the sound remained in the minds of those who heard it. A sound meant movement. Movement meant change. That night, if night was the correct word for a place without cycles, people slept lightly. Some did not sleep at all. They lay still, listening for sounds that had never existed before. The city, once defined by its silence, now felt uncertain. Not louder, but thinner. In the still hall, the elders gathered. They did not sit in a circle. Circles implied equality. Instead, they stood apart, each facing a different wall, as tradition required. This was how decisions had always been made. No one looking directly at another. No one feeding off reaction or expression. "The ice is thinning," one of them said at last. No one asked how he knew. Knowledge did not need proof here. The city survived by trusting what could not be measured. Another voice followed, slower. "The ice has always changed." "Yes," the first replied, "but it has never spoken." That word, spoken, settled heavily in the chamber. Outside the hall, rumors began to move. Quietly, carefully, carried not by voices, but by pauses. People lingered longer than necessary in corridors. They stood near walls that had once been ignored. Some claimed they felt moisture in the air. Others said they felt nothing at all, which frightened them more. A small group formed without ever declaring itself a group. They were not young and they were not reckless. They were simply tired. Tired of measuring their steps. Tired of breathing shallowly. Tired of living in a city where existence depended on remaining unnoticed, even by oneself. They gathered in unused chambers near the outer layers of the city, where the stone pressed closest to the ice. There, they listened. Drip, drip. Each sound felt deliberate, as if the city itself were counting. One of them spoke what the others had been thinking but had not dared to shape into words. What if the ice is not protecting us anymore? The question did not bring panic. It brought relief. Because if the ice was no longer protection, then perhaps it was something else. Something temporary. Something that could be changed. They began to observe, not with tools. Tools produced heat, but with patience. They marked the walls with scratches so faint they could only be felt, not seen. Over time, the marks shifted. The ice moved, slowly, constantly, and it was moving inward. Meanwhile, the rest of the city responded the only way it knew how, by tightening its rules. Light was reduced, movement was restricted. Gatherings were discouraged, then quietly forbidden. The elders did not announce these changes. Announcements drew attention. Instead, the city simply became narrower. Corridors were sealed. Chambers were declared unstable. Silence was no longer just expected. It was enforced. Still, the water continued. Drops became threads. Threads became dampness. Dampness became cold pools forming where no pools had ever existed before. The city was not flooding. It was dissolving. Some claimed this was how it ended before. Others said this had never happened at all. Both statements felt equally true. And beneath all of it, beneath the rules and the fear and the careful breathing, a thought began to spread. Not loudly, not clearly, but persistently. If the ice could change, then so could the city. They did not call it melting. That word carried violence, urgency, destruction. Instead, they spoke of loosening, of allowing the ice to breathe, of giving the city a chance to remember what movement felt like. The first attempt was almost nothing. In one of the outer chambers where the wall was already damp to the touch, they gathered close together. Not for warmth, they avoided that instinct, but for steadiness. One of them removed a glove and pressed a bare palm against the stone. The contact lasted only a few seconds. When the hand pulled away, there was no visible change. No crack, no sound, but something had shifted. They felt it immediately, like a pressure releasing somewhere deep and unseen. Later, when they returned, the wall was wetter. Word traveled faster now, not through speech but through behavior. People began avoiding certain passages. Others lingered near them longer than necessary. The city was no longer uniformly quiet. It had regions of attention and regions of fear. The elders noticed. They always did. In the still hall, the rules hardened. No direct contact with the outer walls. No gatherings outside designated hours. No unaccounted movement between chambers. These were not announced as laws. They were framed as precautions. But everyone understood the meaning beneath them. The ice was no longer something to trust. It was something to defend. Those who wished to preserve the city as it was began to organize just as quietly as the others had. They called themselves nothing, but they believed themselves to be custodians, not of people but of balance. They remembered fragments of old warnings, stories passed down not as history, but as instinct. When the ice weakens, one elder said, the city becomes visible. And when it becomes visible, another added, it is called. No one asked what did the calling. They didn't need to. Meanwhile, the group near the outer chambers continued their work. Slowly, carefully, never twice in the same place. They learned how much warmth a body could give without being noticed. How long a hand could rest before it crossed the line between change and damage. The city began to sweat. Water traced the ceilings, drops fell more frequently. The sound that had once terrified people became, for some, a comfort, proof that something was happening. Children were the first to change. They began asking questions. Why were some corridors closed? Why did the walls feel colder in certain places? Why did the air smell different? Questions had always been dangerous. Now, they were contagious. One morning, or what passed for morning, a section of tunnel collapsed. No one was hurt. The stone gave way gently, as if exhausted. But behind it was something new. A cavity, a hollow where the ice had retreated, leaving space where there had never been space before. The city had grown. This terrified the custodians. Growth meant expansion. Expansion meant surface, and surface meant exposure. They moved quickly now, sealing off areas, isolating those who had been closest to the changes. The word traitor was never spoken, but it hung in the air like condensation. People began to choose sides without realizing they were doing so. Some avoided the damp corridors. Others sought them out. Some believed survival meant holding still. Others believed it meant moving forward, even if forward led upward. The first confrontation did not involve shouting. It happened in a narrow passage where two groups met by accident. They stood facing each other, neither willing to step back. The air between them felt warmer than it should have. "You are thinning the ice," one of the custodians said. "We are freeing the city," came the reply. "You are calling something back." "We are remembering." Neither side moved. Eventually they passed each other in silence. But the city felt different afterward, like a body aware of its own fracture. That night the ice cracked, not loudly, not dramatically. Just a faint, distant sound, like something stretching too far after too long. Far above them, on the surface, snow shifted. Below, water flowed for the first time. And the city understood, though no one said it aloud, that whatever it had been built to avoid was no longer entirely gone. The cracking did not repeat itself. That was what unsettled people the most. If the sound had continued, if the ice had protested loudly, they might have known how to respond. Noise could be measured. Damage could be tracked. But instead, the city returned to silence. A silence now filled with expectation. Water continued to appear in places it had never reached before. Not rushing, not flooding, just existing. Along the lower passages, thin streams began to trace the stone floors, following paths no one had carved. In some chambers, droplets gathered at the corners of ceilings, trembling but refusing to fall. In others, the walls darkened slowly, as if absorbing something they had long forgotten how to release. People changed the way they walked. They lifted their feet higher. They avoided certain routes. They stopped leaning against walls altogether. The city no longer felt solid. Those who wished to stop the melting moved through the streets more openly now. They watched. They counted. They noted who lingered too long near the damp places, who returned from the outer chambers with wet sleeves or unsteady breathing. The word dangerous began to replace careless. In response, those who believed the ice should give way became more discreet. They worked alone now, or in pairs at most. No meetings, no shared plans, only a shared understanding. The process had begun, and it could not be reversed. They did not know how far the ice would retreat. They only knew it was retreating everywhere. In the still hall, the elders spoke longer than usual. Not louder, never louder, but more often. They revisited old records etched shallowly into stone tablets, their markings worn nearly smooth by time. These passages were never meant to open, one elder said, tracing a symbol that had lost its shape. They opened before, another replied, and were sealed again. What happened then? Someone asked. No one answered, because whatever had happened, the city still existed, and that fact alone had been taken as proof that silence, restriction, and ice were the correct response. Outside the hall, fear spread unevenly. Some residents packed their belongings, few as they were, and moved deeper into the city, seeking areas still untouched by moisture. Others drifted outward, drawn by the strange comfort of sound, of movement, of change. A few began to speak openly. "We cannot live like this forever," one woman said quietly in a low corridor. "We are already disappearing." Her words echoed longer than expected. Children stopped playing games that involved stillness. They began inventing ones that required movement, running water, even gentle noise. Their laughter, once rare, returned in short, uncertain bursts, and was quickly silenced by anxious adults. But it kept returning. The ice responded. Cracks appeared, not visible but felt. People reported sensations of pressure in their ears, of cold shifting suddenly to damp warmth. Some claimed the ceilings felt higher. Others insisted the floors had sunk slightly beneath their feet. Maps were updated and then abandoned. They no longer matched reality. In one of the oldest residential sectors, a wall collapsed inward overnight, revealing a cavity large enough to stand inside. Within it, the ice had thinned to translucence. For the first time, people could see light, not from the surface, but refracted, distorted, bent into unfamiliar colors. It frightened everyone who saw it. Light was not supposed to behave that way. The custodians sealed the chamber immediately, but the knowledge remained. The ice was no longer an absolute barrier. It could be looked through. And if it could be seen through, perhaps it could be seen from above. That idea spread faster than water. People began to whisper about being noticed, about shadows forming where none should exist, about dreams in which something vast shifted overhead, responding. Sleep became difficult. Those who rested dreamed of weight pressing downward, of brightness leaking through cracks, of voices not speaking, but waiting. The city, once built to avoid attention, now felt exposed from within. And somewhere deep in the outer layers, water began to run continuously, no longer counting its drops. The first open confrontation did not begin with violence. It began with refusal. In a central corridor, once used for shared meals, now mostly abandoned, a group of custodians attempted to seal one of the remaining open passages to the outer layers. They worked carefully, placing stone barriers designed to absorb sound and halt air movement. It was a familiar procedure. It had been done before. This time, Hans stopped them. Not aggressively, not suddenly, just enough to break the rhythm. "You cannot close this," someone said. The sentence itself felt dangerous, not because of its meaning, but because it was spoken aloud, clearly, without hesitation. Others stepped forward. Faces normally turned away now met directly. Eye contact lingered longer than it should have. "This passage is unstable," a custodian replied. "It endangers the city." "The city is already unstable," came the answer. "You're just choosing which part collapses first." For a moment, no one moved. Then someone pushed the barrier aside. The sound echoed farther than expected. That was when everything changed. Voices rose, not shouting, but overlapping. Movement spread outward. People gathering not out of curiosity, but alignment. Choices that had been private were now visible. The city, built on avoidance, was being forced to witness itself. Guards were called, not soldiers, never soldiers, but watchers trained to restore quiet. They stepped between the groups, urging dispersal, warning of consequences that no longer carried weight. Someone laughed. It was brief, uncontrolled, and utterly shocking. The laughter did more damage than any blow could have. From that point on, the rules stopped working. Barriers were dismantled as quickly as they were built. Walls marked for sealing were repurposed as meeting points. The outer chambers filled with people. Not recklessly, but deliberately, as if drawn by an understanding they no longer needed to explain. The custodians tightened restrictions, but enforcement fractured. Some watchers simply stepped aside. Others removed their insignia and disappeared into the deeper passages. By the time the elders called for order in the still hall, the city had already chosen motion. Water flowed openly now. Cracks widened. The ice responded not with resistance, but fatigue. And for the first time in its existence, the city felt loud. Not in sound, but in intention. Leaving was harder than staying. Those who decided to go did not announce it. They gathered what little they owned, objects worn smooth by years of careful use, and moved without ceremony. There were no goodbyes. Goodbyes implied permanence. No one was certain permanence still existed. Some went deeper, seeking regions where the ice still held firm, where silence remained intact. Others moved outward, toward thinning layers and uncertain light. Families split quietly. Children were sent ahead with relatives. Elders stayed behind, convinced that movement itself would hasten collapse. Entire residential sectors emptied over what felt like days, though time had lost its meaning. Rooms once lived in fell silent, a deeper silence than before, heavy with absence. The city did not protest. It adjusted. Tunnels shifted, floors sagged. Old paths curved away from one another as internal supports weakened. Maps were discarded entirely. Navigation became instinctive, guided by sound, temperature, and memory. In the outermost chambers, ice peeled back in slow sheets, revealing raw stone and pockets of air that smelled unfamiliar. Some said it smelled like the surface. Others said it smelled like ending. Those who remained behind worked to preserve what they could. They reinforced key structures, rerouted water, recorded fragments of history onto portable slabs, though no one knew who might read them. Every effort felt temporary. By the time the elders abandoned the still hall, it was already unrecognizable. Moisture coated the walls. Light flickered unevenly. The chamber that had once represented balance now echoed with dripping water and hurried footsteps. Somewhere above, the surface world shifted under warming air. Below, the city loosened its final grip, not collapsing yet, not ending yet, just preparing to let go. The end did not arrive as a single moment. There was no great fracture, no thunderous collapse that could be pointed to and named. Instead, the city ended the way it had always lived, quietly, gradually, without asking to be witnessed. The ice no longer held its shape. What had once been solid protection softened into slow movement. Walls bent inward. Ceilings sagged, then lowered, then dissolved into falling sheets of water that no one tried to escape. The city did not panic. Panic required urgency, and urgency had never survived here. Those who remained understood what was happening. They stopped trying to preserve corridors. They stopped reinforcing supports. The effort no longer made sense. Instead, they focused on moving, not quickly, not desperately, but with intention. Each step was measured, each breath controlled. Some chose to go upward. They followed the thinning ice, climbing through passages that had never existed before, guided by light that grew less distorted with every level. When they reached the surface, they did not celebrate. They shielded their eyes. They stood still. The sky felt vast, aggressive, unforgiving. A few turned back. Others continued north, away from where the city had been, unwilling to be remembered by a place that no longer existed. Below them, the city gave way. Tunnels collapsed inward, not violently, but as if surrendering. Entire districts folded into themselves. Water rushed through spaces that had once been homes, carrying with it objects whose purpose had already been forgotten. In the deepest chambers where silence had been law, the last structures dissolved into dark pools. Stone cracked, ice vanished, and then there was nothing left to hold. The city did not leave ruins. When the collapse was complete, there was no hollow beneath the ice, no cavern waiting to be discovered. The space closed in on itself, filled by water and pressure and time. What had been built to avoid attention succeeded in its final task. It disappeared completely. Above, the ice settled. From the surface, nothing looked unusual. Snow stretched uninterrupted across the land. No cracks, no signs, no evidence that a city had ever existed below. And that was how it was meant to be. Because some places are not destroyed by warmth. They are undone by being known. The city beneath the ice had survived for as long as it had by remaining unseen. And in the end, it chose the same fate. Not memory, not legend, only absence.